In a move that stunned the monarchy, Princess Anne abruptly cancelled Queen Camilla's long-planned state visit, without warning and without apology. The official reason? Logistical conflicts. But insiders revealed the truth. Anne was protecting the crown. Every engagement, every gown, every speech Camilla had prepared, scrapped. In Camilla's place, Anne reassigned the entire tour to Princess Catherine, with the king's reluctant blessing. It wasn't a scheduling issue. It was a royal redirection and the start of a quiet revolution. The cancellation that shook the crown. Princess Anne sat alone in the oak-paneled conference room at 9 a.m. on March 12, 2025, 3 days before the official announcement of the state visit by Camilla. The printed itinerary already spanned 14 pages, grooming notes assigned for 5 outfits, and press lines queued for 72 hours. She scanned the final page one more time and paused, a small, decisive breath. Then she tapped the phone. "Cancel everything," she said. Within 30 seconds, administrators began shredding dispatch memos, recalling couriered invitations, and halting all royal limousine bookings. By 10:34 that same morning, word spread across palace courtyards and through the corridors of power: the visit was off. The stated reason: logistical conflicts. That line, amending 3 months of planning and a 10-nation media tour, stunned reporters who had already printed headlines and scheduled live coverage for April 2, 2025. Gowns stood unworn in Kensington's dressing rooms, press briefings silently evaporated, and a crisp backlog of photocopied speeches gathered dust in a locked archive. For the first time, royal aides witnessed a queen consort's public role being overridden by her own sister-in-law. Anne's intervention is remembered by insiders as a seismic shift. She moved with icy purpose, guided not by emotion, but by what she believed was the monarchy's long-term stability. The abrupt cancellation forced courtiers to shuffle engagements, reschedule cultural dinners originally set for May, and rewrite protocol outlines for 2025. It fractured months of diplomacy at a stroke of midnight. For many, the logistical conflict excuse rang hollow, a royal euphemism masking a deeper power play orchestrated in silence. By that evening, the media exploded. Tabloid front pages blared "Royal Civil War." Broadsheets carried "Anne steps in" across their banners, and palace watchers flooded social media with speculation. Headlines repeated the same phrase: "Camilla snubbed." Commentators pointed out the absurdity of halting a former tour months in advance. The air crackled with whispers, rumors, and shock. The monarchy's public face cracked, and all eyes turned to Anne, the stoic defender of tradition, who had just struck with surgical precision. In the echo of the cancellation, a fragile hush settled across the palace. Gowns hung unused, corridors emptied, and a sense of disbelief lingered like smoke after a fire. Yet behind that silence, a new power dynamic quietly formed. What seemed like a logistical failure was, in truth, the opening gambit in a deeper struggle. Anne's move did more than cancel a visit. It set the stage for a dramatic shift in influence. And as the media storm roared on, the House of Windsor began to realign itself for a larger confrontation. Why Anne chose Catherine. In the weeks following March 12, 2025, over a span of 21 days, Princess Anne quietly convened closed-door meetings with senior courtiers and strategy advisors. She reviewed every engagement scheduled for the next 6 months, tallying cultural visits, diplomatic dinners, and charity galas. Her concern that Camilla's old guard diplomacy threatened to overshadow, even undermine, the carefully cultivated modern image of William and Catherine. Anne observed patterns, reserved smiles, staged photographs, awkward toasts, all signaling a soft power push she believed dangerously out of step with evolving public expectations. Anne voiced a different vision in hushed tones, referring to Catherine as the monarchy's future ballast. She praised Catherine's ability to evoke genuine warmth in as little as 7 minutes of conversation, her knack for remembering a local teacher's name or recalling a child's detail in a crowd of 50. For Anne, these weren't trivial talents. They were the future. Over 3 separate afternoons in late April, she argued with advisors that giving Camilla another diplomatic tour would reinforce an old-school elitism. Instead, Catherine's quiet charisma, modern, empathetic, grounded, offered a more sustainable path forward. By early May 2025, the decision was made. Camilla's staff scrambled to salvage the visit. They petitioned, lobbied, threatened withdrawal of support, even floated alternative schedules. But Anne had already overwritten the official plan. All diplomatic duties originally assigned to Camilla would now belong to Catherine. When the king granted reluctant blessing, courtiers froze. For the first time in living memory, a queen consort lost a major state function, not to scandal, but to structure. The palace's internal memos shifted overnight. Lead diplomat, Princess of Wales. Cloakrooms were reassigned. Chauffeurs, planners, press liaison, all reallocated. It was more than mere logistics. It was symbolic, a signal that the monarchy was migrating from tradition toward transformation. On May 15, 2025, a new royal calendar was drafted. Catherine at the center, representing the crown abroad. Camilla fading into a background role. The old hierarchy trembled. Senior courtiers, once loyal to the old guard, found themselves reassigned or sidelined. And through it all, Anne remained silent, watching from the wings. The silent coup had succeeded, not with noise or scandal, but with clarity and control. As the palace brass rearranged diaries and cancelled old assignments, a hush enveloped Clarence House and walked through the grand halls of Kensington. Courtiers picked up pens, not for loyal fealty, but to rewrite allegiances. The move from Camilla to Catherine wasn't explosive, but it was undeniable. The old guard flickered, while a new order quietly stepped into place. And behind closed doors, loyalty fractured, loyalties shifted, and whispers turned to the stirrings of crisis. What came next would be Camilla's reckoning. Camilla's rage and isolation behind palace walls. On May 16, 2025, just 24 hours after the new assignments were formally announced, Camilla retreated to Clarence House, slamming the door behind her with audible force. Within the ornate reception room, richly patterned carpets muffled footsteps, but the air crackled with tension. She demanded an emergency press offensive. At 14:30, she insisted that an official statement be drafted, then another at 1800, then yet again after 2100. Her aides, once confident and composed, scrambled. Phones rang off the hook, keys clattered. But the institution offered no backing, no cameras, no statements, only silence. In the following 48 hours, her closest strategists fell silent. The sharp operators who once orchestrated photo ops and controlled leaks became pale, uncertain messengers. One senior advisor, in a panic, threatened resignation, a final act of defiance. Another accused a colleague of betrayal under hushed breath. Ominous words like loyalty, legacy, and betrayal floated through the stale air. Rumors began to leak, whispers of Catherine being fragile, speculation on marital strain, even suggestions of emotional burden impairing her performance. None were verified. Yet each was picked up by a tabloid outlet within hours. But the public, remember 2025's increasingly skeptical 60 million-strong media audience, responded with contempt. Headlines compared the deceptive tactics to those once used against Diana decades earlier. Social media erupted. Hashtags like Not Again and Crown Truth trended across nations. People saw through the veneer. They sensed a woman cornered, not scandalous, vulnerable, not dangerous. And the repeated silence from Catherine's camp worked in her favor. Where Camilla tried to manufacture noise, Catherine let the lack of response speak volumes. The gambit backfired. In the wake of the media storm, Camilla's influence began to erode, not with a bang, but through absence. International invitations quietly went to Catherine. Diplomatic dispatches were rerouted. Clarence House, once a hub of activity, grew still. Courtiers left early. Press agents stopped emailing. The infrastructure of power collapsed under the weight of exclusion. Camilla remained, but her presence no longer commanded space. The palace echoed with her omission. William's unyielding line in the sand. By June 2, 2025, exactly 81 days after Anne's intervention, Prince William convened a quiet summit in Kensington Palace. The group included 3 senior advisors, 2 media strategists, and Catherine herself. For over 2 hours, they outlined a new approach to royal diplomacy, one that rejected the traditional pomp of Camilla's era and emphasized a contemporary strategy rooted in compassion, accessibility, and cultural resonance. William was resolute. "This isn't just optics," he reportedly said. "It's the future of the monarchy." For William, Camilla's approach represented everything the crown needed to shed in 2025. He viewed her recent itinerary as outdated, highlighting elite museum visits, inaccessible black tie affairs, and rigid ceremonial engagements. He wanted a reset. He envisioned diplomacy shaped by causes, not costumes, impact, not invitations. His vision: royal engagements focused on education, climate, mental health, issues with traction in the real world. To many, it felt like the ghost of Diana had returned, but now with a son at the helm. And this time, the prince would not back down. Caught in the middle stood King Charles III. At 76, his strength and schedule had already diminished. Sources close to the palace revealed he received William's new framework with reluctant acceptance, murmuring only, "It must evolve." He neither defended Camilla nor opposed William, a royal paralysis that echoed throughout the institution. That silence proved louder than any declaration. Courtiers knew the king's passivity was a tacit blessing for his son's maneuvering. The heir wasn't asking for power, he was exercising it. With Catherine now officially embedded in every major international engagement for the remainder of 2025, a shift had been codified. Invitations were filtered through Kensington. Diplomatic travel budgets, once held by Clarence House, were reallocated. Camilla's former staff were given reduced duties or reassigned entirely. The monarchy didn't need to announce the change. The new order had arrived, not through conflict, but command. And William stood firm as ever on the line he had drawn. As William redrew the monarchy's compass, the weight of legacy pressed heavier than ever. This wasn't just generational change, it was reclamation. One family's future was being forged, while another quietly faded. In boardrooms, back corridors, and beneath centuries-old portraits, the palace realigned. Yet amid this upheaval, one figure moved with graceful inevitability. While Camilla retreated and William reorganized, Catherine stepped forward, not with fanfare, but with purpose. Her moment had come, and she was ready to carry the crown's modern soul abroad. Catherine steps in. On June 9, 2025, Catherine, Princess of Wales, touched down in Toronto for her first official solo state tour, the same one originally planned for Camilla. The itinerary spanned 8 days, 12 cities, and 19 engagements across Canada, highlighting mental health, Indigenous reconciliation, and early education. She arrived not in a couture ensemble, but a smart, eco-conscious British label, signaling immediately that this was not a performance. This was a mission. The world watched, and by the end of day one, it was clear. The people had chosen their queen. She met with school children in Mississauga, danced with First Nations leaders in Alberta, and led roundtable discussions on youth wellness in Halifax. These weren't stiff photo ops. They were conversations. One teacher remarked that Catherine spent over 20 minutes listening to a single classroom's challenges. She laughed, shared, even cried. Headlines flooded in. The People's Ambassador read one Canadian newspaper. Le Monde called her the future face of monarchy. A U.S. State Department official was overheard saying, "It's refreshing. Finally, someone royal who feels real." Contrast was everywhere. Camilla's past visits from 2016 to 2022 were often formal, stiff, and marked by awkward engagements that drew modest coverage at best. Catherine's presence rewrote the blueprint. In one Toronto shelter, she removed her heels to sit cross-legged with survivors of domestic abuse. That moment, captured in a photo viewed over 18 million times on X, formerly Twitter, became the symbol of a new royal tone. Not just visible, but vulnerable. She wasn't there to be seen. She was there to see. Critics were quiet. Even traditionalists who bristled at Catherine's soft approach couldn't deny her effectiveness. Diplomats praised her briefings. Locals loved her warmth. Every handshake felt earned. And she never mentioned Camilla, not once. Her silence on the upheaval back home was not avoidance. It was elegance. She embodied poise without pretense, and in doing so, made a public coronation out of a cancelled itinerary. This was no longer Camilla's stage. It was Catherine's world tour. As Catherine's tour gained momentum, the royal machinery back home sputtered under the weight of its own recalibration. Clarence House windows stayed dark past 7 p.m. Public statements ceased. And behind closed doors, fury brewed. Where once Camilla dictated the press narrative, she now watched as it rewrote itself without her. But Camilla wouldn't go quietly. If the institution abandoned her, she would speak through the one channel that had always listened, the media. And so began the war of whispers. Camilla strikes back. The morning of June 15, 2025, saw the first strike. A suspicious tabloid headline appeared in a Sunday paper long known for its royal sources. Cracks in the crown? Concern for Princess Kate's health behind the scenes. The article cited anonymous palace aides who alleged Catherine was overextended and facing emotional burnout. Within 48 hours, 2 more stories emerged, one questioning her marriage, the other implying strained relations between her and Charles. To royal watchers, it was obvious. Camilla had returned, this time wielding ink instead of itinerary. Her strategy echoed the darkest tactics of the late 1980s and 1990s: targeted leaks, weaponized rumors, and manipulative exclusives. Those familiar with the playbook immediately recognized the signs: carefully placed quotes, subtle innuendo, strategic character attacks. It was a media war, but unlike past skirmishes, this time the palace wasn't playing defense. Kensington refused to engage. No denials, no clarifications, no press briefings. They didn't need to. The public remembered too much. Within 10 days, Camilla's press offensive began to collapse. Online backlash reached record numbers. Over 1.6 million posts on social platforms condemned the attacks, many invoking Diana's treatment in eerily familiar language. "Haven't we seen this before?" one viral post read. Editorials in major outlets, The Times, The Guardian, even The Washington Post, condemned the smear campaign. It had the opposite effect. Catherine's approval rating soared by 12 points in a week. Silence, it turned out, was more powerful than spin. Camilla, once adept at manipulating narratives, found herself drowned in their undertow. Her attempt to claw back relevance became her undoing. What started as a calculated press strategy ended in public disgrace. And through it all, Catherine said nothing. She smiled at engagements. She waved to children. She visited hospitals. Every appearance spoke volumes. She didn't need to defend her crown. She had already won it. Not with power plays, but with presence. Diana's Shadow and the Moral Reckoning. June 21st, 2025, 28 years to the day since Diana's final charity gala, became a date royal watchers marked with chilling symbolism. On that morning, Catherine stood on the steps of the Montreal Children's Hospital, surrounded by grieving families and medical staff. She didn't deliver a speech. She simply listened. A photographer snapped the moment she embraced a mother who had just lost her son. The photo was shared 24 million times in 36 hours. That image, to many, confirmed what words couldn't. Diana's legacy had passed to her son's wife, quietly, powerfully, and irrevocably. William's moves throughout the spring and summer of 2025 weren't merely institutional. They were spiritual. In palace hallways, aides began referring to his strategy as the people's realignment. He had no interest in coronets or brooches. His aim was the soul of the crown. Camilla's removal from the tour had not just sidelined a consort, it exorcised the last vestiges of the monarchy's most controversial chapter. To millions still loyal to Diana's memory, it felt like justice, not in a legal sense, but in an emotional, historical one. What made this reckoning even more profound was Catherine's refusal to seize the spotlight. She never alluded to Camilla, never referenced Diana directly. She didn't need to. The comparisons drew themselves. Her warmth, her restraint, her grace under siege, all mirrored the late princess without mimicry. The public didn't project Diana onto Catherine. Catherine simply echoed her, naturally. In every smile, every gesture, every choice of charity, she embodied what Diana had tried to build before her life was cut short. By July 2025, the palace's own polling confirmed it. 74% of Britons viewed Catherine as the rightful public queen, regardless of title. Camilla's name barely registered. Inside royal circles, even staffers who once served Charles began requesting transfers to Kensington. The energy had shifted. The crown hadn't changed hands by law, but by heart. And in the moral reckoning that followed, the monarchy stood not on ceremony, but on memory. Diana's son and his wife had done what no court decree ever could. reclaimed the throne's emotional legitimacy. The echoes of Diana's memory rippled not just through public sentiment, but through the very foundations of the institution. It wasn't just grief, it was direction. William and Catherine had become the monarchy's compass, calibrated not by bloodline alone, but by values long ignored. And while the world watched this spiritual succession unfold, inside the palace walls, a colder reality set in. Loyalties fractured, power bases shifted, and soon the royal household itself would become a battleground, not of swords, but of silence. The palace divides. By July 18, 2025, the division inside Buckingham Palace was undeniable. Staffers now referred to their colleagues as KC or KP, shorthand for Clarence House and Kensington Palace. It was more than gossip. Seating charts at internal meetings were redrawn. Calendars were filtered by allegiance. Junior aides who once floated between royal households were told to declare a preference. What was once a unified machine had splintered into two cold, strategic operations. And in the middle of it all stood silence. Not orders, not decrees, just absence. Aides loyal to Camilla found themselves slowly phased out. One senior press officer who had worked on Camilla's 2022 Jubilee schedule was reassigned to a desk job in the Duchy of Cornwall. Others were offered early leave packages. Behind closed doors, whispers spread, "If you're not on Catherine's side, you're already out." The monarchy had become a mirror of its own dysfunction. Protocol on the surface, fracture beneath. Where once the Queen Consort's wing hummed with influence, it now sat eerily quiet. Its printer rarely used, its phones no longer ringing. Charles, ever the pacifist, attempted to mediate. On July 23, 2025, he reportedly called a private meeting with William, Catherine, and Camilla. The location, Balmoral. The goal, unity. But sources say the meeting lasted only 47 minutes. Camilla exited visibly shaken. William remained expressionless. And Catherine, composed as ever, simply nodded and left. It was not a summit. It was a surrender. From that day forward, all press releases, public briefings, and event planning were managed solely through Kensington. Clarence House had been reduced to ceremonial relevance. As August approached, the institution looked the same from the outside, but within, it had evolved into something unrecognizable. A house divided not by rebellion, but by redirection. No one was fired. No statements were made. Yet everyone knew the truth. The monarchy's center of gravity had shifted. The old guard clung to titles. The new order held purpose. And in the sacred quiet of palace protocol, a revolution had already won. While internal divides threatened to hollow the palace from within, Catherine's outward presence only grew. The further she traveled, the more rooted her image became, not just as a duchess or consort, but as a symbol. From foreign capitals to Commonwealth communities, she became the face the world recognized and welcomed. The crown's future was no longer speculative. It had a face, a voice, and a mission. And soon, that mission would redefine the monarchy on a truly global scale. A global stage. September 3, 2025. Catherine and William landed in Nairobi for a landmark 5-day tour of East Africa. This wasn't just another diplomatic trip. It was the monarchy's most ambitious foreign engagement since Elizabeth II's final tour in 2011. The itinerary included environmental summits, youth innovation forums, and reconciliation ceremonies tied to Britain's colonial past. The message was unmistakable. This was not a couple upholding history. They were rewriting it. And for many watching abroad, this was the crown's rebirth. In Kenya, the princess addressed a crowd of 12,000 university students without notes. In Uganda, she stood barefoot beside genocide survivors. In Tanzania, she launched a UK-funded women's health clinic in one of the poorest regions of Arusha. Foreign leaders, often critical of royal optics, praised her authenticity. One Tanzanian minister was quoted, "She listens more than she speaks. That alone makes her powerful." Global news outlets ran headlines like "New Monarchs Without Crowns" and "William and Kate's Quiet Empire." Camilla's name was nowhere in sight. As the plane touched down in London, it wasn't just two royals returning from duty, it was a future fully formed. Catherine and William stepped onto the tarmac not as heirs-in-waiting, but as de facto sovereigns of the public's trust the world had chosen. The institution had followed, and with every handshake, every reallocated responsibility, every redrawn briefing, the crown edged closer to a quiet revolution. One that would soon be sealed with a final, unmistakable declaration. The monarchy reborn through silence and strategy. October 1st, 2025. The palace released a 92-word statement. No press conference, no signature, no fanfare. Just a simple final decree. All future state visits will be conducted by the Prince and Princess of Wales. It was bureaucratic, even bland, but to those who understood palace language, it was deafening. There was no mention of Camilla, no gratitude, no explanation. It was the monarchy's way of closing a chapter, one that had once tried to write over Diana's memory and nearly lost the institution in the process. Camilla was still queen consort in title, but her era had ended not with scandal, but with irrelevance. She reportedly now spent most days at Ray Mill House, away from central engagements. Public appearances were cancelled indefinitely, citing exhaustion. Internally, her staff had been reduced from 22 to just 6. Clarence House remained operational, but it was a museum, a place frozen in time, not disgraced, but displaced, not ousted, but outgrown. No dramatic abdication, no headlines of scandal, just a quiet shift that redefined royal power. Camilla's silence now echoes louder than her presence ever did. And at the center stands Princess Catherine, graceful, composed, and carrying the future of the monarchy on her shoulders. Anne didn't just cancel a visit. She rewrote the royal script. What was once Camilla's spotlight now belongs to someone else. The message is clear. The crown isn't just surviving, it's evolving.